Hi there. Today we're looking at how to draft, cut, and sew this beautiful plunged neckline corset with illusion yoke and some waistline detailing gown using the easiest and most beginner-friendly method. If this is something you'd love to learn, do stick around and let's do it together. We mark this to serve as our starting line, and that is our upper bust line. Then we move down 3.5 inches to our nipple line, then 3 inches to our under bust line, 3 inches to our waistline, then 8 inches to our hip line. This might not be the same for everybody, but then it depends on the difference between your upper bust, your nipple, your under bust, and your waistline. Yes, after that, we square these lines off. On the nipple line, we mark our nipple to nipple divided by 2 and replicate same on the hip line. Then we draw a line to connect them both. On the under bust line, we move away by 1 inch on both sides and do same on the hip line. Then we draw a line to connect them. We also move to the nipple line and connect. As you can see, mark 1 inch above the nipple point. It measures 3.5 from here. Then on the top, we come by 3 inches. Then we move away by 2 inches. Then we connect both to the same point. We square the 1 inch above the nipple point. Then we measure the bust divided by 4, add our seam allowance to it. Measure this distance, then juxtapose to the other side. Then we connect it to the bust divided by 4. On the waistline, we subtract 2 inches from our waist, divide it by 4, then we add our dart, then our 2-inch seam allowance. On the hip line, it's our hip divided by 4 plus our 2-inch seam allowance. Then we connect them, as you can see. Now we take our nipple to nipple measurement to this other side, then mark. From this point on the hip line, we move away by 2 inches. Then we draw a line to connect them. From this point on the waist, we move away by 1/2 inch. Then we draw a line from this point through the 1/2 inch to the hip line. At the center front, we move down from the waist by 6, on the hip line by 4. We cut this very portion and we flip this dart onto the next. Then do same at this very side. Then with a curve, we connect these 2 points. On the side seam at the base here, we move away by 1/2 inch. Then we refine to the waistline. We are also refining this curve that connects from the upper bust to the under bust. And we're doing same for this very side as well. For the plunged neckline, we come in by 1/2 inch. Then we connect all the way to the under bust line. On the nipple line, we are moving up by 1/4 inch on both sides, as you can see, and we connect it to the nipple to nipple point. This is to ensure that it caps the bust very well. This shaded portion is what we don't need, and so we're going to cut those portions off, and it wouldn't be part of our corset. We're folding this dart on, and it's beginning to give you the essence of the capping I was talking about earlier. Right, we're moving inward by 1 inch and then outward by 1 inch. And this is going to serve as number 1 and 2, which would only be a boning channel. We're not going to cut through this very line. And so we label them 1, 2, 3, and then 4. And the arrow is showing where it's going to be the head. Now for the back, we've extended our hip line our waistline, and then our arm depth line. This is the bust divided by 4 plus our 2 inches. This is the waist minus 2 divided by 4 plus our 2-inch dart and then our 2-inch seam allowance. When it comes to the hip, it's our hip divided by 4 plus our seam allowance, no dart added. Then we connect from the arm depth to the waist in a straight line and then a curve to the hip line. This is our nipple to nipple plus quarter, and we are replicating same on the hip line. So this is 3 3/4 as against the 3 1/2 for the nipple to nipple at the front. On the side seam, we are measuring 4 inches as we had for the front and then 6 inches for the center back. Then we mark the base of our back bodice. We are opening our darts by 1 inch on both sides. Then with a diamond shape, we connect all the way to the shape we had. Remember, it's not going all the way down. This, we are taking our 2 inches seam allowance off. Then we divide what's remaining by 2. So this is what we are also measuring for the waist. The seam allowance is not part, and so we mark the midpoint. Then we draw a line to connect all the way to the shape beneath. At the waistline, we measure half on both sides of this straight line we just drew. Then with a diamond shape, we construct our second dart. At the center back, we are measuring 1 1/2 inches downward, and then we're going to connect it to our seam allowance. And so we first would cut the top, then we fold these darts on, now we would mark what you see. The shaded portion, as we have for the front, would also not form part of our corset. This is to guide you to know which of these would form part of our dress. We label them beginning from the side part, so 5, 6, and then 7. Then we'll go ahead and cut the various pieces. This is very easy, and this is beginner friendly, I'm sure. Comparing the front and then the back side seems to see if it's okay. Then we'll go ahead and cut the back too. Great. So these are the pieces we'll be using. We've cut 4 pieces of each of the pattern papers, and so 2 for the lining, 2 for the fashion fabric. So this is how we have added our seam allowance. This and that side allowance is added. This and that side we've added our allowance, and this very side. For 4 and 5, no allowance is added. Allowance is here, allowance is there. And then those parts that we're going to join together that we had cut earlier, we're going to add allowances to them. Now we're taking off the various parts so that we go ahead and stitch the pieces together. And so this is number 4 and number 3. We pin them down with our fashion clips, and then we connect number 1 and 2 also to it this way. We're doing so for the fashion fabric, all the fashion fabrics. I would also go and do same for the lining. And when it comes to the back too, this is how we connect them. When you arrange them this way, it becomes easier, to connect the pieces together. And so we stitch these ones, and then we'll go ahead and also stitch the linings the same way. I always like to begin from the end, and then we'll come and start from the top like this, so that there's no excess or none of them surpasses the other as you stitch. It's very, very important. We stitch the end, we'll come and start from the top, then we stitch all the way down. This is a very, very good, practice. That's what we're repeating. And so what we stitched initially was the back, and this is the front. This is number 3. Number 4, we're coming to connect number 1 and 2 to it. Remember, number 1 and 2, there is this line in between, which is a boning channel, and so you do not cut through them to have 4 pieces, even though we label them as 1 and 2, 3, and then 4. We are snipping through, creating notches, and that makes it easier to attach our bones. When attaching the bone, we make sure we leave half of an inch, where the bone doesn't reach there, and then we also cut it short by half of an inch as it gets to the top. This is one thing we'll be doing for all the boning channels. So as you can see, we did not start from the tip. The bone started about half of an inch away from the base of the fabric to which we are sewing the bone. This very part is also very critical. When you are getting here, it's very, very advisable to wide open, the lining. You pull them apart and then you stitch, so that the curvy nature you had on the bust area, doesn't top stitch itself. When it does that, the breast, area flattens instead of it to bulge to accommodate the breast. And so that is one thing we should all be very careful about. Right. Measuring half of an inch, and that would also add an extra bone. This helps to support the upper bust, and then it wouldn't cave in when you add this extra boning. I'm using size 8. The size 8 boning, it's not very, very strong. There's also a stitch on bone. It's not that strong, and so you're advised to use as many as would support the structure. And so from here you can see that I'm adding extra boning, and that was aside the traditional boning channels I had. This is to support the side. Bear in mind, all these bonings are being done in the lining. This is the back pattern. We're also marking half of an inch. This is the center back where the lacing is going to be done. And so it's advisable to also bone this very side, so that as you lace the dress, it doesn't cave in. It would be upright at the back. So we'd also use our traditional boning channels, and then fix our bones on them as well. There is no specific number of bones that you are expected to use in a particular dress. It all depends on the strength of the bone and what you want it to achieve. After stitching all the pieces, it's now time to stitch the lining to the fashion fabrics. And so we're putting them good size together. Then we pin them. We'd go and then stitch the neckline first. So that we stitch this very side to where the notch is. When it comes to the back too, we're going to finish the back neckline. For a crispy finish, on the edges, I advise that you stitch whilst placing hem tape, a fusible hem tape, on it. That is as you stitch. Then we are doing an under stitching of the lining at the back neckline. That's what we are starting with. You can start with any of them actually, but that's what we are working on right now on your screen. After stitching the neckline, we're also coming to stitch the center back where the lacing will be done. Then we are stitching the base. All that we have left is that of the opening on the side. When it comes to the front, as I said earlier, we are stitching the neckline first. It's also advisable to use your hem tape and then you stitch them as part of the neckline. We are creating our notches. Where there are curves, it's advisable to create notches so that it gives you a crispy finish. We would as well do our understitching of the front neckline. Right. From there, where we had plunged the neckline, this is where it ended on the underbust line, and so we created a notch there. We are stitching from that very portion all the way to the top of the neckline. This is the back. We are fishing and turning it good side out. In case you find this video useful, please don't forget to subscribe and click on the notification bell so that you get to see our next video. Right. Because of the boning, turning it inside out sometimes is a bit difficult, but then it's worth it. Right, we would have to go ahead and give it a good press. So this is what we have. We finished the base. We are yet to go and stitch these portions, to get a nice seam. After stitching, we press, and we are press opening the plain seam. We've gone ahead to fix our eyelets, so we place them good sides together and then stitch our seam allowances. Our skirt is a regular pencil skirt, with our hem allowance and everything. The difference is that the front is without that and then the back has that allowance added. And so we'll sew our pencil skirt. Then as the model comes on to fit the top and that of the skirt, we are closing the plunged neckline. It is not necessarily closing it, but then because it's wide open, when you lace it, it wants to open wider. And so we are just basting in between to get the space that we want to have, in between her cleavage before we place our skin net on. And so we're just lacing, which would remove later. So we know we are very sure of the space we are getting, to review in between her cleavage. Right, and so it fits perfectly well now. And we are also okay with the back. we are shaping the basket, the shape, the V shape we have down here. That is what we are shaping, we are marking. Checking to see if that's exactly what we want. Once it's good to go, we cut that off. Now we mark same on the top bodice, right along the edges of the skirt. That is the waistline of the skirt. Then you mark all the indications that you would want so that the skirt aligns with the top perfectly well once the client, removes the dress. Right, and so now the detailing on the skirt. With our brown paper, we sketch this. Making sure it aligns on the hip line perfectly well. Then we cut off any excess. This is easy to follow. If there is any difficulty or anything you need explanation on, you feel free to bring that up in the comment section. Yeah, so we're cutting off the excess now, and then we'll also mark the shape we want on this other side. And so we'll use this, to cut our fabric with a lining. This is what we've done for one of the sides, making sure that the lining is a little bigger, than that of the fabric that's coming to the good side. So the print fabric is coming to the good side, and the lining will be that of the gold color. That is a contrast fabric. And so just look at how we're stitching it. After we stitch from one side, we are reducing the seam bulk on the edge, and then we pull this backwards and stitch to make sure that it's the same at the rough edge. I don't know if what I'm saying makes a bit of sense. We are trimming off the seam bulk. Then look at this, we pull this backwards like that so that it aligns with the other one equally on the unsewn edge. Yeah. So this is to ensure that when we flip it over, the gold color, which was at the base, would be showing a bit on the edges. That is the intention. The reason why we made the lining a bit larger than the print, fabric that's coming to the good side. Yeah, so this is what we have. The gold is showing, on the bodice, serving as a border line. And so we've done same for both of them, and we're fixing to the skirt. Then we take it to our machine and we'll go and fix them. Now making sure that the seam allowance on the skirt is not sewn in addition to the detailing. And so you just saw that we pulled that away. We stitch it to one side, we pull it away, then we continue. We do same for this other side as well. When we are attaching it to the top of our dress, we'll do the same. As we stitch to this very corner it is advisable to take the seam allowances of both the top and the skirt off. It doesn't add to, the bulk in the dress. So it's advisable to pull them away and then continue stitching. These kente strips measures 30 inches in length, and we have 3 pieces of them. The width, we just used the straps of the kente, so it wasn't necessarily measured. So now it's being folded into 2, as you can see. And then I'm fusing. This is one type of fusible interface that you can use. It has, a plain patch on the back where you can iron, and then, you take it off. Then you'd have the adhesive getting attached to the fabric. Yeah, so that's what you see right now. We iron this, and then we can peel it off. And the adhesive, adheres to the fabric that we have. Yes. And so after stitching the very side, we are turning it good side out. And the adhesive, would be in between. So we'll go ahead and give it a good press. Just like that. Now there's also another piece. It measures about 16 inches, and this is the length that would be for the off shoulder. So I'm also pressing the interfacing, on, which will be ripped off afterwards and then turned good side out. This is the wrong side. Bear in mind, this is just to make sure that after we've turned it to the good side, the two becomes very crispy. That is, the edges becomes very crispy. If you don't have this, it shouldn't really be a problem. You can just turn it to the good side, and then you insert some fusible hem tapes inside before you give it a press, so that it sticks and then it doesn't open. I don't know if you understand. Now we open it from this very side. Yes, we are turning it to the good side. I stitched it with this thread at the very corner, as you can see, and that is what is making me, be able to turn it like this. Anyhow you turn, your strap inside out, you can use that technique, and it's fine. And so you see, because of the fusible hem tape in there, it becomes very, small, very tight, as you can see it. So that will be the base, what we just stitched, and these are the 2 that we had done earlier. So now we're just going to create pleats on the base. That is, we are creating pleats on the base of the off shoulder sleeve detailing that we just did. So you just do this, you go ahead and stitch it down. Quite easy. We've done that for the first one, and we're doing so for the second, and the second will be a little below the first. Right, so we're just going to do this, and also we'll stitch it down. Yeah, so you can see how we're stitching them. Quite different from the very first one that we had done the pleat directly and stitched on. With this, we're stitching in between so that it gives you the wave effect. Right, so after that, we are laying the down part down so that we stitch, leaving the other side, so it's just like we creating the inverted pleat design. Yes. So the end of one part meets the beginning of the other part as we press it down, and then we stitch. Right. And so as our client fits her dress, it's now time to insert the skin net, that is a yoke, over the gown. And so we make sure you stretch it over her bust, and then you pin them down, making sure that no part of the skin net is sagging. It should just lie on the skin as beautiful as possible. So we just pin them as you stretch, and this is going over the dress. There are those who would also insert it behind the gown, but you can do it over as you see me do right now. It's also ideal to be communicating with a model to see if the fitness you're getting, the tightness of the skinnet over the body, if it's okay, or if you'd want to loosen it up a bit or whatever. That communication should be there to ensure a perfect and a comfortable fit. That's also a good assistance I'm getting from my colleague. It helps when you have somebody around to also hold it up for you. Right, so we're cutting off the excess, and because we've pulled the skinnet over her shoulder, it's giving some kind of a sleeve, like a very short sleeve kind of effect, and that's also ideal. Now we're cutting that off the back so that we're able to open the dress up. Yes. This skinnet is of high quality, so it hardly, tears apart. So this is what we do. You first stitch along the edges of your dress. That is a skinnet. You first stitch that. I did that, but then unfortunately I lost that part of the video. Quite unfortunate. But then you stitch all along the edges, and then you trim some part of the net, as you can see. Then we flip it backwards and then stitch the base of the skin net. I don't know if we get this. At first, you just place the skin net on the dress, then you stitch the edge just about quarter. The quarter is even too much. You stitch just about 1/8 of an inch. That is very close to the edges, from the armhole part all the way to the plunged neckline, to the other side over the bust. You stitch that first. After stitching it, then you cut the excess so that you have a little to work with. then you flip those ones upwards. So this is what I'm doing right now. I'm flipping the excess of the skin net, to the top. If you could study carefully. When you do this, we'll be able to cut off the excess of the skin net, and we would have stitched on the skin net twice onto the dress. It makes it stronger, and then when you do the detailing on the edges, it will conceal, where you did the stitching. Yes. So now this is the excess we are trimming off. And then you can see that we have just a little of the skin net along the edges of our dress. Yes. So after that, we did some beading and some detailing on, and then our client, comes to do her last fitting, where we insert the off-shoulder sleeve detailing onto the dress. And at this point, we are pinning it onto the skin net, and voila, this is what we have. Thank you so much for watching. See ya.